Welcome back to Vectorworks 2013. This is the Design 2A series, episode 6A with James Russell. Today we're going to be looking at importing, and when I say importing I mean specifically for plans. We're talking in the theatre world right now, and we're going to look at 3 different types of imports. This is also relevant to many of our other courses that we've been doing. I'm going to be looking at importing a DWG file, commonly brought in from AutoCAD, sometimes SketchUp as well, or you might just find it as a general venue plan. I'm going to import a PDF today and try and convert it out so we can use some of the snapping data from it. And I'm also going to import an image file and see what data we can get from it. So let's start off with the DWG file. Now DWG is normally an export, as I said, you get from AutoCAD. Most venues would have a DWG or a VWX of their venue. Some venues only have a PDF, and that's okay too. Just depends on how they've done it. So from the file menu, I'm going to go down to the import option and choose import single DXF/DWG. Most of the time this will cover all of your drawing bases. You can also do a single DWF if you need to, or you can do a combination of various different types. This is normally the most common one that we use, the single DXF DWG, and don't worry about the letters, they're just different formatting options, whether it comes as a raw text file, whether it comes as an actual working drawing. You'll see there's a lot of other options down here as well, some of which I'll go through. But mainly we're just going to stick with this. So import single DXF/DWG. Clicking on that, now I've already located my folder here. I've got the TR final document. This is a document drawn by Architect. That's the, it's drawn by ArchiDude, I have to say. And he's drawn the Judicial Court Complex. I think it's a working drawing somewhere in there. So I'm going to use his drawing here. Click Open. You can see it does this kind of check through the document, and it gives us this lovely import options menu here. Now these are my active settings. You can save default settings depending on if you've got a particular client that sets things up in a specific way. We've got determine the settings for the units automatically. You can also set the units, so it's going to have a look through the document and see what's appropriate. Decimal formatting as well inside there, and you can tick this box if you want to set the units to match. So that means if you're bringing a document in, say from the US, that uses inches, for example, you could tick this box and it would make Vectorworks work in inches while you're working with that document. You can also see the model space here. It wants to fit my page 1 to 1000, or you can choose this scale 1 to 1. I might choose this scale 1 to 1 just because that's how I like to work. But if you like to work fitting it to the page, etc., etc., you can just do that. It means that when you print it later on, you won't have to scale up or scale down. That's another topic that we're going to talk about again, just to reiterate that point that we covered in our lesson 4 about layers. Converting 2D and 3D objects, sometimes it's quicker to just do all 2D, sometimes you might want all of the 3D data but not the 2D data. I generally like to cover both bases and just do 2D and 3D at the same time. Got some preference settings in here. You can choose what resolution you'd like to bring those objects in. Some rendering packages might like to do objects such as spheres at a really high detail with a large number of polygons. We're just going to leave it on the Vectorworks preference settings for now. There's also a graphics tab here, so you can set the line colors to line weights. If you're importing something from AutoCAD, you'll notice that the way AutoCAD works, it has colors for different pen thicknesses, and that's what that means. It means to choose the bank of colors and set them to line weights. I'm going to leave it as colors just so we can see that breakdown. And you can also set the colors to black and white, which gets rid of those color options and makes them black and white. Obviously, the best idea here would be either check neither of these and keep the colors, or to check both of them, which means that you'd be mapping the colors, but then also turning them back to black and white, which is what we're used to working with. You can set dash lengths, and you can choose whether to import the layers as classes or layers. It's just a breakdown on whatever system you're using at the moment. And sometimes it's good to add a prefix as well. So in here, if I've already got some layers set up and I then want to import a whole heap of other layers, it might be useful for me to name the prefix of those layers. I'm going to do it as an example here. I'm going to call these DXF. And I might like to put a 01 or something in there so that I know that's my first import of this DXF. And you'll see they'll just have a nice little dash in front of them with that prefix tagged on. Lastly here we've got the objects, and that's if it's just bringing in symbols. It's going to bring points in as loci or symbols. That's just option handling there, and it hasn't picked up any of these here, but you can have multi-lines, you can have some blocks with clipping, how it handles those, and also if there's different attributes attached with records. And we'll talk about records and worksheets coming up in lesson 7 or lesson 8. So I'm going to hit OK, and we can just see it's probably going to bring up, yep, the font mapping. Sometimes when you're crossing between systems, fonts don't quite line up. It says here the font Arial TFF, which is quite a standard font. It's going to replace it with my version of Arial, which is fine. I'm pretty sure that's going to be okay. Hitting OK, and you can see it just works its way through this little bar here. It's analysing a whole heap of objects that are inside this drawing. I've already had a quick sneaky peek at this drawing and seen that it's quite complicated, but it's just for bringing this in and having a look at. So as that's completing now, it will flash up on our screen and show us a whole heap of data. Finishing, and there we go. So you can see we've got a lot of data happening here. My computer's just having a little think about that. I'm going to zoom right out and just show you. So it's brought in all of this data, starting from this left hand side here. You can see this person's done a lovely drawing of this proposed floor plan here. It's fully dimensioned up, and you can see we've brought in different line thicknesses here represented by the different colours in the pen. Got a whole heap of dimensions laid out, and it's just a nice drawing. Now all of this is snappable, all of these are line drawings here, and probably some of it's been brought in as boxes, so you can see I can pull objects out. Just having a little think as it's trying to catch up with what I'm doing here. And probably later on I would then break this down from its current classes. You can see it's broken it into our DXF01, and here's all the different classes here, and I would go through and turn each of those on and off, and probably select each of these here and make them an individual layer as well, just so I could get rid of some of this data, because as I zoom out even further you'll notice there's heaps going on here. So the next step that I would normally do here is just make sure my dimensions were correct. To do that, just to speed up my document, I'm actually going to select all with my Control A, or Apple A for you guys on a Macintosh. You'll see it'll take a moment to think about that, and probably up here it's going to be a ludicrous amount of objects. There you go, almost 100,000 objects. Just to simplify this, I'm only going to keep one component of this. So I've just done a shift click and drag over that portion. You'll see it reduces that number of objects down, and then we're going to delete everything else. So just imagine that I'd culled everything down to the appropriate layers. You can see how quick and responsive my document is now. Now I'm going to take a guess and say that these dimensions aren't correct, and I think that's because they've been interpreted as Vectorworks dimensions. But what I can see here is we've got a corridor that's 2 meters wide. Here we've got some dimensions on this canteen, for example. So let's have a look. This kitchen here. Okay, this is a good point to start. So this kitchen here, it says, is 5.3 meters wide by 7.15. Now I'm measuring that as 134.62. Now this is the perfect time to use your scaling options. So just here on my little bit of paper, I'm just going to write those two dimensions. Okay, so I've got those two written down, and now we're going to do some scaling. So just remembering across that kitchen away there, at the moment we've got it as 134.62 millimeters, and it's meant to be 5,300 millimeters. What I'm going to do is just tap X. I'm going to select over everything here. Could have done Control A again for me, and I'm going to go up here to the model. Here we go, modify, sorry, to scale objects, the fifth option down. Now I could have done symmetrical and figured it out as a scale factor, but I'm going to use it the easy way. My current distance I'm going to type in is 134.62, and in my new distance I'm going to type in 5,300. Scale text, yep, sure, why not? Sounds good. And the entire drawing, probably not at this time. I could have just checked that originally, but I'm going to hit OK, and this will blow itself up hopefully, and I'm just going to have a little think about that. And possibly crash. Might just pause and let you know how this one goes. We managed to survive that one, luckily, and you can see it's been scaled up. So now let's have a look at the length of these dimensions. That's looking a bit more realistic. Look at that dimension marker right there, 5,300 as it's meant to be. Now we could check this obviously by going across to this side here and having a look. It's registered this one here as 7,000, the width from there to there, which is pretty close. I would almost have to give it that. And if I just measure the internal sizing of this, hopefully I should get somewhere pretty close on the marker. 5,299 by 6,931. Probably give or take a little bit. There we go, there's that little bit that I'm missing. just down here to this marker line, 7,150. So I would then lock that off and say that's probably the right scaling. I'm not sure what scale that was that we just scaled up by, but I'm going to now knock that drawing off and say that's the right dimensions. So it's always important to check that the drawing that you're bringing in is scaled up to the right size, and sometimes you might have to get your scale ruler out, hold it against a PDF, or check it out, find out the venue drawing and figure out what needs to be scaled up or what needs to be scaled down. So I'm just going to start a new document straight out here, new blank document, and we're going to have a look at importing a PDF. So I've also got another PDF stored up here. I'm going to go down to my import options and down to PDF just here, import PDF. So here I've got the Empire Theatre seating plan that I've taken from their website. This is a local theatre in Toowoomba, Queensland. So I've got that here and I'm going to choose open. I only want the first. I'm going to choose the first page. You could do all pages, it just brings them in, but probably have a quick chat about referencing, which is this checkbox here. So the difference between importing this PDF straight into my document and referencing the original PDF is that when you reference a PDF on file from, in this case, an absolute path, which means a path on your computer, it's located somewhere on your computer, it doesn't bring the PDF into your Vectorworks document as such. It doesn't save all the PDF data into the document. It references that PDF to the outside location. The advantage in doing this is if you are working with someone else, another contractor, another designer, and they keep updating their plan set. If they send you the new plan set and you update it to that exact file path that they might be working on, or you've brought it in for your email, if you update that PDF, when you open this Vectorworks document up, it will have that updated PDF inside it, already there, ready to go. So that's the advantage in referencing it. The disadvantage, I guess, to keeping it in your document and obtaining it to yourself is that you'll have a larger file size. So two things to keep in mind there. If you bring the PDF in and don't reference it, your files might be a bit larger, but you will have all that data ready to go with you. You'll have it inside the Vectorworks file. If you reference it, it can be updated constantly, but if you take the file, the Vectorworks file, away and leave the PDF on your computer, it's just not going to be there. So keep that in mind. I'm going to just choose these one-to-one pages, click import really quickly there, just didn't even think about it compared to our DXF import before, and here we go, we've got this lovely PDF imported. Now at the moment you can see as I hover my mouse over, I've actually automatically got snapping points in here, and the great thing about PDFs when they've been exported from AutoCAD or Vectorworks is they contain vector data. Vector data is what you're seeing here, all these chairs and all this wall here, it's made up of vectors, and that means that this point here, as I zoom in, this corner here to this corner here and this corner here, ideally has infinite resolution, because all of these lines here are determined by points and a mathematical formula joining the points. So any curves here or pieces of text, if you keep zooming in and zooming in and zooming in, this should remain crystal clear as far in as you go. Perhaps not on that text, but certainly on any of these vector-based lines. I'll see if I can find this curve here for an example. Hopefully, if this is based on a line, which it looks like it is because it seems to have curvature points in it, if I kept zooming in and zooming in, this line should remain, in theory, always crystal clear. Now it might be because of the DPI of this PDF at the moment, but it certainly will when we convert it across in a moment. The easiest way to get the data out of a PDF, obviously I could use this PDF in its current form, but if I want the real line data, is simply to go ungroup, which I'm going to do Control U for. Those of you on a Mac, it'll be your Apple key plus U. And it says, do you want to ungroup high-level objects? High-level objects basically mean grouped components that might have a slight risk or large amount of processing data to them. In this case, this object here has probably got a couple of 100,000 lines inside it. That's just a guess, so I'm going to click yes and see what happens. And it'll probably spit out a couple objects. There we go, 7 objects up in the top right-hand corner. Now at a guess, the smart cookie, whoever's drawn this, has broken it up into some walls, probably some seats, and maybe a few doors and some background images. So the first thing you'll be left with, if I just drag these components out individually, is the original PDF. It sits on top, you can see it's here as a bitmap image. So that's if you want to use it as an actual reference, but what you'll notice is it no longer has that snapping data included to it. So I'm going to hit delete straight on top of that. The next one normally is the page background, just represented by a rectangle, so that's the actual page border that was originally back there as another layer. You can hit delete on that as well. Now what you'll see we're left with is some components in here. I'm just going to see, we've got a group there. How many groups do we have left? Probably 5, yep. got a rectangle up here, or a polygon in this case. That's probably where a border or header was. We're just going to separate these components out. We've got one there, got another group here, and we've got some side doors. Okay, so that's the separate groups that are remaining underneath there, probably in some sort of layer format. The great thing about this though is that whoever's drawn this has left our walls intact as a group here, as you can see, and I'm just going to rotate on the plane. You can see there they are on my 2D, 3D plane, just so I can have a little fly around, and automatically you can already see that this is quite a nice little theatre plan. What I am going to do though, I'm going to ungroup these objects here. I've got 10 objects. Now what are they? Are they polygons? Yes they are. So I'm just going to grab those together, ungroup again, so I've got all of those selected, and immediately I'm going to extrude those objects, presuming that they're all polygons, which they seem to be. I'm going to have to guess here because I couldn't find the actual heights here, but I'm just going to say, oh, I don't know, 8 meters. Let's try that out for starters. It's probably going to be more like 12, but if I hit OK there, it doesn't look like a great change, but as we've learnt from extruding, when you do it from your top layer, it doesn't have much of an effect. Now that's obviously far too high because I haven't scaled this PDF. Let's go back a step and try that out now. So back here to where we've got these objects out. Now across the pros here, that's from here to here where I know the stage is. I'm just going to measure that out from here across to here, and you can see we've only got 302 mil, which means this was probably at a 1/50 scale when I brought it in. That's why you've got to scale it up first. So let's say that we've got 302 across here. Going to select all of these objects once more. From the modify menu, choose scale objects. And I'm going to do 302. Now, once again, don't have a dimension here, so I'm just going to have to guess. I'm going to say that the distance across this pros is about 12 meters, I should say. Scaling text as well, even though there's none left on this drawing. Hitting OK, and you can see that's boosted that right up. So now if we have a look at this and we grab all those objects again, which should be all the way down this side, and all the way down this side as well, trying not to capture that door. I'm going to try and extrude now at 8 meters, and we'll see if that's a little bit more realistic. And you can instantly see I've got the form of my theatre starting to pop out here. If I go into an even rendered mode, you can instantly see this has just given me an exact representation of what that theatre could be. I could raise each of those seats out and do some seat mapping in there. I could put that little stage piece on. In fact, I might even do that. I might just jump straight into here and just using my polygon trace tool right here, I can trace the edge of this out. We'll just do it really roughly. I'm going to come along here, straight across, up, across over to here, out the front over here, straight across to here. I'm going to find the midpoint of this line. I'm going to go all the way back here into my stage. Let's say that the stage is also 12 meters deep. Straight across to there. Just going to get a nice little snap on the back corner there. Backwards into here. I think I misclicked there, so I'm going to take it back 1 point. And this is once again just me quickly sketching this out for you guys, so you get a nice little example of the potential capabilities of what you guys are dealing with. And back to the original starting point somewhere here. Oh, I accidentally missed that, but it's going to work anyway. I'm going to mirror that across. Straight across to there. I'm going to add these two components together. There we go, that's lovely. And then I'm going to extrude that straight up, and let's say that we've got a raise of 1200 on that, and hopefully when I rotate that around, once again this is just a guess on my behalf, look at that, we've got a nice little stage popping out the front there. So instantly you could sit there anywhere inside that audience and have a look up onto that stage, figure out some bits and pieces, put a nice little pros across the top, and you'd be set. And you can see that took me, what, no longer than 2 or 3 minutes just to pop that out of the page from a PDF. So that's the great advantage in being able to tear these PDFs apart, steal their vector data, and if they've been drawn properly or exported properly, you can do exactly this with it. Obviously I could have composed all those lines as well and brought it through that way. Speaking of composition, we're going to look at doing that to a bitmap file now, I think, or maybe even a GIF file that we've used before. So what I'm going to do, I've just deleted that, and I might start a new document just for the sake of starting new documents. Here we go, back into our new document. I'm going to go from the File menu, Import, and I'm going to choose Import Image File. We've seen this button before. Now you might remember this geometric art piece that I think I used in episode 2 perhaps, maybe episode 1, I can't remember. I'm going to hit Open on that. Import that. Sure, a PNG, why not? It seems to prefer that. So here I have an image file. This one doesn't require scaling because I don't actually know what scale it is. But what I did want to show you was the capability of Vectorworks to figure things out. And it's pretty crafty in the way it does this. I'm going to go up here to the Modify menu and down to an option called Trace Bitmap. Basically what Trace Bitmap does is it traces out line objects of a certain thickness and then recreates them as line objects for Vectorworks. So here when I click the button and I've got this object selected, we get a dialog box called Trace Bitmap. It asks us two main questions. What is the maximum width in pixels and what is the collinear sensitivity? The maximum width in pixels basically says how wide is the average line, or how wide is my maximum line. So for example here you can see that there's some variation in these line thicknesses. This line thickness, just at a guess, might be, oh I don't know, maybe 1.5 to 2 pixels in width, and this one here could be 4, let's say, just for guessing around there. So I'm going to set the maximum as 4. It seems to have chosen that as the default anyway. And the collinear sensitivity is just the accuracy on these curved sections here. So a low will basically join the dots in a rough kind of pattern, medium in a higher, and then high is obviously the best that it can do. So I'm going to leave it on 4 and medium for this test and just have a play around with it if you're doing this at home to see what different variations you can get on the quality of your outputs. I'm going to hit OK, and it's probably going to have a big think. You can see down there in the right hand bottom corner that it's having a nice little think about that on the lovely green bar that's represented. And that green bar is helpful. It's one of the few times that I actually go and have a look at it to see if Vectorworks is working away. It's given us a group from that. And I'm going to presume that group's sitting on top. Yeah, it is. So in the background there we should still have the bitmap. If I pull this out to the side, maybe pop it over here, what you see is my original bitmap on this left hand side and Vectorworks' attempt at tracing that bitmap on the right hand side. It's had a fairly good go at it. It's actually done quite a nice job, and those of you who did the exercise, I think it was a 2A or 2B exercise, you're probably kicking yourself now. Don't worry, your efforts were more accurate than this will be, but this is great for representation. Now, this at the moment, if I ungroup it, is probably going to be a hectic, chaotic mess of lines. Let's see how many it comes out to as I ungroup this. 31,000 lines. And that's all selected inside that lovely perimeter right there. So that's lines at the moment. What if we want to take it a step further than lines? Well, there is one more option that I normally can do from this stage, and my computer's going to struggle with this as well. From the Modify menu, there's an option called Compose, and Compose is basically add lines together to make polygons. And you bet it, underneath here there's Decompose, which is take polygons, break them back down to lines. I'm going to click Compose, and I might have to pause the video and see what happens. Yep, I'll be back in a sec. Anyway, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, we're finished now. We've finished composing our lines into polygons, and this is our result. You can see it's slightly more cleaned up than before. And if I select over all of this, we should end up with objects now as opposed to lines, and it's been culled down a lot. But what you can see is I can actually grab each of these. I'll grab the background border here by accident. I'm going to get rid of that. But you can see I can grab each of these. Oh, I've grabbed another background border. Can I grab this one? Are you gonna? Can I have at least one? Is that going to be fair? Okay, fair. We'll just have one. You can see that some of these components here, and Vectorworks has tried its very hardest to get this out, but it's actually made some of these components out correctly. This one here is a good example. You can see this piece here. It's a whole piece that it's managed to make. It's in fact made 2 of them because it felt so good about making the first one. Okay, maybe it made a few more than 2. 1, 2, 3 of them. That's probably just due to that trace parameter, and it's tried to make the best of what it can do. But Vectorworks has had a fairly good crack at this. You can see it's won on some of these examples here, and it's lost on a few of the other ones. But that's just an example of how you can try and have a go at this, and Vectorworks, it's done a really good job of interpreting this drawing here, which I had no idea about, and it's turned it into lines and polygons for us. That can be handy to you. Sometimes you might bring an object in. A really simple bitmap normally works very well for this, just a simple one-line drawing. If you've managed to do that, you might have sketched it on your tablet, scanned it in, anything along those lines. Give it a go inside Vectorworks, and maybe you don't have to trace it out like all of us did doing this exercise when we did it back in 2B or whatever it was. So that's another example of how bringing things in as an image file, bringing in another source material can be really useful for doing, quick and easy tasks in Vectorworks. So that's what I'm going to cover for this lesson. I think we'll cut it off there. As I said, there are going to be some more episodes coming up. Hopefully I'll release a 7 and 8 and a 9. I really want to cover worksheets, and I really want to have a detailed look at some more tasks that we can do together. So if you have suggestions, make sure you leave them in the comments below. If you've got feedback to go along with this series, I'd really appreciate it as well. So don't hesitate to get in contact by email, leave a comment, send me a personal message, send me a Skype, anything you like really. I'm James Russell, and I will see you next time. Cheers.